Chapter 22. Gone but not forgotten. Church Lester exited the stage of Bloody Bledsoe history by hanging himself in his lonely cell at the Elizabethton Jail, March the 17th, 1938, 2 weeks after he received his death sentence. He reportedly said, "I'll not let them put that electric cap on my head." Church asked jailer Pat Bowers, who had delivered his lunch about 12:45, if he had any mail from the home folks. The jailer said, "No mail today." Around 5 o'clock, Pat Bowers and Lige Davis returned to the cell with Church's evening meal, and as they entered, Davis turned to Bowers and exclaimed, "My God, Church Lester's hung himself." The prisoner was found dangling with one foot resting on the bottom bunk of his cell, and the other foot not more than a half-inch above the concrete floor. After closer examination, they discovered 2 holes had been cut in the wide leather belt that Church had worn since being arrested. This belt was used to make the death noose. The belt was looped around the bars above the door, and another loop was around his neck, with his hands tied behind his back. Authorities believe Church had slit his belt in 2 places and made a loop in the belt, slipped it around the bar above his cell door, and keyed it with a spoon from his cell. They believe that he then made a rope of a shirt in his cell, bound his own hands, and jumped from the top bunk. The other bunk in his cell was stripped, and no other prisoner was in the cell with him. When county physician Dr. J.A. Harden examined the body, he said it took over half an hour for Church to die. The toes and soles of his shoes were worn down from scraping the floor. Some people speculate Church may have not have hung himself, but was hung by others. A coroner's jury and the county physician determined Church died of strangulation. The newspaper reported Church's last days were spent reading the Bible almost continuously, and he had been visited by a number of pastors. He told them, "Everything's all right." Reverend Chelsea Bowden, pastor of First Baptist Church in the area, said Church told him, "I'm sorry for what I done, and I'm ready to die." 2 notes to his wife were found in his cell. The first read, "Darling, I have stood this punishment as long as I wish. I want you to look after the burial and leave room for yourself at your death. Take good care of yourself and Woodrow. God bless you both, and I'll meet you in heaven." A second note read, "Take all of the knives back to Pikeville to the boys so you can get them back. I owe John Gilbreth $1.98 at Reach's store. Pay it." Church Lester's funeral service was held just outside the Lester home. Numerous members of the American Legion from Bledsoe County and Ray County attended the funeral of the military veteran, along with an estimated 700 to 800 family members and friends. At the time of his death in 1938, Church's pistol had 7 notches on the grip, indicating the number of people that he had killed. This number was thought not to include the 3 gouge girls. Calhoun Swofford and Coleman Johnson would have accounted for 2 of these notches, but only 2. It's believed Church killed either 5 or at least 2 other people for which there's no record. Who were the others? Roy Boring thinks Church may have killed Roy Hauser and possibly his brother Henry Hauser. Both brothers disappeared from the mountain and were never heard from again. Roy Hauser was said to have stolen a lot of whiskey from moonshiners on Walden's Ridge. Church reportedly threatened him, "If I ever catch Roy Hauser stealing my whiskey, I will kill him." Henry disappeared in the mid-20s, and Roy disappeared around the same time Church killed Swofford and Coleman in September of 1935. Church may have caught Roy stealing his whiskey, may have killed him and buried or somehow did away with his body. Church took his oldest son Harry to Susan Olinger to keep the same day that Roy Hauser disappeared. Church may have caught Henry stealing his whiskey, and he suffered the same fate. Today, the grave of Church Lester sits inside a quiet and lonely small Lester cemetery on the old Frank Lester homestead, which now belongs to the state of Tennessee. The pine trees sway in the breeze as they shade the cemetery. Nearby is the foundation of the old Lester home where Church grew up. The remnants of the old tanning vats used by Church and his father are a short distance down the lane. The Bible tells us that we shall reap what we sow. Of course, Church will certainly be remembered for all the trouble he was involved in. On the other hand, he should also be remembered for his infectious smile, outgoing personality, humor, generosity, and all the good deeds he did for his many friends. Church had more friends than enemies, and he'd do anything for his friends, no matter how dangerous the task was. His ultimate demise was caused by his willingness to risk his life to assist his Tollett friends, who had previously stood by him in his time of need. His many descendants, relatives, and friends living on Walden's Ridge and everywhere else should always remember the good deeds of Church and be proud of the good side of the man. We all should try hard to avoid the temptations and pitfalls of life to which Church fell victim. The roots of Church Lester's attitude and actions can be attributed to him growing up and living in the era between 1893 and 1938, when Bledsoe County was known far and wide as Bloody Bledsoe. This was during the wild, roaring 20s and the Prohibition era, after the not-so-long-ago Civil War had so bitterly split Bledsoe County. Church was living in a time when disregard for the law was at its peak in the Sequatchie Valley, with its confining mountain ranges, but he was truly a child of his environment.